this is the one that we will debate. So I would like to perhaps invite the Deputy Mayor to start the debate on the long-term plan for 2015-2025. Yeah, no, that's fine. Andrew.
Thank you. There's much in this long-term plan and in the Mayor's recommendations, which now form a part of it, that I do support, particularly when compared to the draft long-term plan that went out for consultation. I welcome the lower rates increases. I welcome the reductions in the capital programme. I welcome the additional funding for New Brighton. I welcome the reinstatement of the full amount of community funding and the proposal to leave the core infrastructure assets, Orion, the port and the airport, on the strategic assets list. That's the reason I've already voted in favour of the majority of the plan which is in front of us for option today, because I am happy with it. But there are some parts of the plan that unfortunately I have some real difficulty with. This plan involves taking Lancaster Park, Addington Arena, City Care, Red Bus and council-provided off-street parking off the strategic assets list. It puts forward the position that these assets are not strategic. I find it difficult to see how the council providing quality public transport to keep its people moving on reliable buses can be considered not to be strategic. Among many submissions pointing out the importance of central city parking, the Central City Business Association urges not to remove off-street parking from this list. These issues were well debated earlier this week when we raised an amendment to keep these things on the list of strategic assets, but the key point is that this proposal will make it easier for council to sell these entities without further consultation with the public, and I can't possibly support that. This plan allows for consideration of capital raising by ways other than the sale of assets. That's common sense, and I welcome that. But at the same time, it also still allows for the sale of $750 million worth of assets, which I can't possibly support. It proposes consultation prior to the sale of the core infrastructure assets. On the face of it, that's great. But the reality is that despite any consultation, the plan fundamentally allows $750 million of assets to be sold. We've already gone out for wide community engagement and then formal consultation and then a hearings process. The result on each occasion was that a clear majority opposed the sale of assets. So why, after that, would we continue to support the sale of assets and have yet another round of consultation? Late last year, the People's Choice councillors agreed to consider the sale of some assets if that was absolutely necessary. Since then, the conversation has progressed. More work has been done, more options have opened up, and there are at least two reasons why we now believe that there is no need to sell. We believe that we can significantly reduce capital budgets so that we bring spending within our means. Some work has already been done, and there'll be a full review of the capital programme after the 1st of July. I absolutely welcome that, and I intend to do everything I can to ensure that that review will be as thorough, robust and far-reaching as possible. I expect that that'll have an effect on the 2016 annual plans, but I believe more could and should have been done already to reduce the size of the capital programme before the 30th of June this year, in order to alleviate the need to raise capital in the first year of this plan. The limitations on our ability to do this have been one of my biggest frustrations, and I know that's shared by others in recent weeks. We also believe that capital can be raised in other ways, for example, by placing debt on the council's companies, via internal capital restructuring. Even preference shares are back on the table, an idea that we first promoted back in December 2014. We put up a number of amendments earlier in the week reflecting this alternative approach. That presented an opportunity for the Mayor and for those councillors who have supported the sale of these assets to pull back from that proposal, and in doing so to fully respond to the overwhelming opposition to the proposed massive sale or potential massive sale of the city's assets. But they did not take that opportunity. The People's Choice continue to support the retention of the city's assets. We've consistently supported the people's right to have their say in what the council does and the people's right to be listened to, and we'll continue to do so. It's been suggested that this is an ideological debate. In fact, this is a debate about respecting people's ownership of these companies through the council. There are no surprises in what I'm saying today. Comments I made at the time of the adoption of the draft plan for consultation were consistent with what I've said today. Then I said that even though there were parts of the draft I disagreed with, I wanted to go out for a consultation because I looked forward to hearing what the people of Christchurch had to say about it. Well, we've now heard from the people of Christchurch. We've heard that an overwhelming majority said that they did not support the position of selling assets in our companies. And it's for that reason that I cannot support those parts of the plan which do allow that to happen and which I fundamentally disagree with.
Thank you. Paul.
Well, I haven't got a speech prepared, but I perhaps don't want to debate so much about the plan because I'm actually in support of the plan and I think it's a good one. I do want to talk about, though, where we've come to and how we're here today. And if I reflect back to the earthquake in September 2010, like most of us, I woke up in the morning, ran around my bedroom and almost ran outside naked. Thank God I didn't put a dressing gown on. And it was at that moment I realised that I needed to step up as a person and try and do something about the situation we found ourselves in. So I decided to step up for my community. I worked in the business association, and at that time I worked pretty hard to get the city back on its feet. After the February earthquake, I knew things were quite different. It was a massive earthquake, and it did irreparable damage to our city. And it was at that point, 4 days after that, I came up with an idea, and it was the Restart project. Very hard to do. It was really hard to get off the ground and really hard to make successful, but we did it. But it was made through connection with people, working with those people to achieve that goal, and you don't do it alone. And obviously, coming into the council elections, a number of opportunities came up where the mayor stood down, the current mayor at the time, and Tim Carter stood down, and I looked at the opportunity, and I ran against Leanne, but partly to build mandate for the city. And Leanne got that mandate. And I'm actually proud to be here as a councillor and endorse your proposed plan for Christchurch. You know, we've debated, we've listened to our community, and I think we've got the nuts and bolts of a very good plan. And as I said earlier this week, it's with those nuts and bolts we can create the vehicle to take us to a better future, and I think we're going to do that today if we adopt this plan. So, you know, we can argue all about the sale of assets, not sale of assets. I don't think that's what that's about. I think we've actually made it very clear we will try not to sell assets. We want to find other ways to actually find the income or the revenue we need to actually go forward in the best way forward. But I think this plan gives us the flexibility to create that better future. You know, as I said, it's a massive earthquake. We've got a big job ahead of us. No one expected this here. And I'm actually, again, proud to stand alongside my fellow councillors here and bring this plan to fruition. But as I say, you know, it's a big job, big decisions, and I don't think anybody realised how hard this job would be in this particular term. You know, as I said, you know, the Restart project was hard, and I think this term of council is harder than anybody ever expected. We had unexpected surprises within our finances. We had unexpected surprises within, deals that have been done prior to us taking on this here. But we've stood up and we've faced those challenges, and I think the plan actually reflects that. So I actually urge everyone around this table to support this plan. Let's bring those nuts and bolts together. Let's create that vehicle to bring us to a better future.
Thank you. Ali.
Thank you. I have to say, when I first saw this draft of the LTP, I would have liked rates to be lower. I think that higher rates not only affect people on limited incomes who own houses, but also affects a large number of people, particularly in Christchurch now, paying very, very high rates. However, this would have meant, or we could have done that, I felt, by greater capital release. But the effects of this on the lower returns from the entities releasing the capital, I understand, is counterproductive, which is a shame because I still would like to see those rates lower. Much has been said about sales of assets. Now, I didn't run on a platform that preempted what I'd find at council. I don't have any political affiliations. I ran to be a part of making the decisions which are best for Christchurch and for our people. And there's been a lot of give and take around this table from many of us. I am not very patient, as some of you know. I should be more tolerant. Shut up, Vicky. However, we were elected to lead, to listen and learn. And I think that we need to remember that. The consultation process and hearing from our people is a key part of decision making. However, consultation is not consensus. Consultation is about information gathering and gaining feedback. And we as elected members are in receipt of all of the information needed to make an informed decision. There's been a lot of movement since the consultation, but you can't please all of the people all of the time. We're governors of the city. I want to get on and govern. Let's actually get on and do it. I would like to acknowledge my colleagues, though, in the PC camp. Despite not agreeing with many of their positions, it is healthy to have a variety of positions around a table. It's a reflection of our people in the city and some of their views as well. I also want to acknowledge our staff who have worked incredibly hard, worked incredibly long hours, and have responded to the terribly truncated timeframes promptly and professionally. None of us wants to see capital release if it can be avoided. It clearly can't. Owning for the sale of owning is not fair for those still dealing with broken pavements, roads, pipes and community facilities. You cannot have your cake and eat it. Now, Councillor Turner mentioned an overwhelming majority of Christchurch people not supporting asset sales. Now, this is entirely unsubstantiated, and in fact, many that I have heard from were very supportive of doing what is needed to be done to return our city to a level of amenity and repair that we should have at this stage of our recovery. I'd also like to acknowledge our Mayor Leanne Dalzell, who's worked so diplomatically and effectively to progress this LTP to this stage. Please support this today. We need to make decisions. We need to make the hard decisions. That's what we were elected to do.
Bill.
Well, I'm really pleased to finally be part of the debate for this long-term plan, which, as Councillor Lonsdale referred to yesterday, that it must include the vision for our city. And as other speakers have indicated, this is a huge challenge, solving the zero and actually achieving a balanced budget. It's also a privilege, though, to be making such important decisions on behalf of our city and also for future generations, really. And I actually welcome the changes that the Mayor and councillors have agreed to around lowering the lower rates, and that there's some protection for three of our major strategic assets, like Orion, Lyttelton Port Company and Christchurch International Airport. But the LT long-term plan package actually, I think, could have done a lot more, as Councillor Turner indicated, to reduce our capital spending. And I also think it's unnecessary to sell up to $750 million of our assets at this stage. And in fact, the stats on the submitters show quite clearly that 83% of those who submitted about assets in particular, they asked us to retain our city's assets. And I believe we must listen to the people. Many of the people who submitted about that could not understand the need for speed on this and the haste, and they questioned also our capability to deliver on a work program which is so enormous. And I think the messages we got were that really the assets belong to the people. They belong to our community. And in fact, even people who supported the sale of assets said, look, only do it when, in fact, the uncertainty has been clarified, that there was no urgency to do this. And they also asked us to prioritise our infrastructure repairs. And I, unfortunately, have found that there's been insufficient availability of resources within this process for us to actually do that effectively. And I believe actually if we truly had the will and real determination, we would have got a better result. I certainly clearly recall David Close, as the former chair of this Council's Strategy and Finance Committee, pointing out that over the last 3 years, we'd underspent our budget by $3 billion. And clearly following that, there would have been ways we could have made more savings. We also, in many ways, when we heard from the people, we heard about two cities. And it was like a tale of two cities. And one group who are fixed, who are quite okay and want the city to move on fast, but another group who are actually quite tired and weary and where their streets and their footpaths have not been fixed. And Jim Anderton pointed out that in fact we are a low-income city, that half of our population in Christchurch earn under $30,000 a year, and a third of our people pay rent for their homes. They live in rental accommodation. So, and that the city as a whole won't benefit from the sale of assets. Jim also pointed out that with Orion, for example, since 1969, our city had received over $1 billion in dividends. That's pretty good, so why would you sell it? I also recalled Dr. Garth Kent urging us to take time, because in fact, if we lengthen the time for the repair of our city, that the immigrants who have come in with their families will make long-term, they'll become residents long-term and become citizens and continue to contribute to the fabric of the city. I want to comment about Red Bus, and I was really pleased that following the submissions, that some of our major assets are going to remain strategic. I'm actually quite sad that there's an intent today to delist Red Bus, because that Red Bus company is part of the provision of a public service, part of our city's public transport, which we've had since the time of the Christchurch Transport Board. And in fact, it's the flagship of the different companies who operate bus services here, and in fact sets a very good standard for the achievement of a well-run system. And owning Red Bus, in fact, should give us leverage to run our transport system. And so Red Bus is more than just the money value, it's a key part in enhancing our public transport as one of our council's goals. I want to thank our staff, particularly around transport, because I think they do a tremendous job. And especially with the exciting announcement today of the government contributing, I think it's $41.6 million of funding towards our cycleways, is a tribute to the expertise and hard work of our staff in the transport area. So the other part of transport that I would like to have investigated, and I think we need to do this at the time of our annual plan, is that there were submissions on light rail, which I certainly agree with. So today I urge councillors to certainly sign off the full funding for our cycleways. I think that building our cycleways is a great example of sustainable development in Christchurch. And it's with some sadness I can't support the whole of the long-term plan, because I can't support the delisting of those other strategic assets. And I think, though, that our council must show at the time of our next annual plan that in fact we can really address our budget with more sustainable alternatives and still achieve a balanced budget. Thank you.
Thank you. David.
Thank you. Look, I feel really privileged to be part of a council that's dealing with this LTP. And it's probably, well, not probably, I think it is the most significant financial consideration the city's ever had to deal with. The earthquake sequence, I believe, has created a financial issue for Christchurch that's really required us to think outside the square and adopt initiatives that may be unpalatable to some, but in reality there's an inevitability about some of the things we have to do, and I believe the things that we are doing today are really quite fiscally prudent. I'm going to plagiarise a comment that I heard in the last couple of days ago from Tom Hooper, the Chief Executive of CDC. He said to me after a meeting that the approach that the city needs to adopt is, what does the city need to achieve the rebuild objectives that it wants and become a preeminent city in New Zealand and globally? And then address the issue of how do we fund them. So we could ask the question, you know, do we need to invest in infrastructure? Yes, we do. Does the city need a stadium, a library, a 50-metre pool? Yes, it does. Does the southwest area need a new sport and recreation complex? Yes, it does. Does New Brighton need a promenade and a hot salt water complex? Yes, it does. So I just reiterate that philosophy. We need to identify what the city needs to rebuild and to become the preeminent city of New Zealand, and then find the ways to finance those proposals. I really believe today we will adopt a very good plan that will be the platform to rebuild our city in a manner that puts Christchurch in the forefront of New Zealand and globally. So I am going to support the Mayor. I think it's a very good proposal she's put forward today, and I urge other councillors to do likewise.
Thank you. Pauline.
Look, we know these are challenging times for the people of Christchurch and for their council, and consequently this is the most challenging LTP that any council around New Zealand will be signing off. It's a first for me as a first-term councillor, even though I'm one of the third longest serving. The response to our draft was huge, and we listened to many residents who made the effort to come and speak about their concerns, and it was an incredible turnout of people, and we've got to respect the effort that takes for people to actually do that. And I thank them for that. But I must emphasise that many were positive with great ideas to utilise and embrace the opportunity our recovery and our regeneration offers us. Many of these ideas are around our natural resources, walkways, adventure parks, gardens, beaches, and I can see Christchurch quickly becoming a sought-after destination for accessible outdoor pursuits. Eventually we will have an amazing city, arguably the best in New Zealand. But we know this is going to take time, as all good things do. And one of the most important projects we have, of course, is our cycleways. 13 separated cycle paths. They'll be safe, they'll be beautiful, and they will also help reduce the cars on our roads. We're committed to working with ECAN to get our public transport running well, and consequently being well patronised. Residents can be forgiven in thinking that not much is happening at times, but look around. The roads, the underground pipes, a hive of activity, also a pain in the proverbial at times, but a huge job. One of the, if not the most consuming and important projects we have on our plates also at the moment is the Land Drainage Recovery Project. The cost of this over 30 years could be as high as $1.22 billion. Currently we have $440 million over 3 years assigned to that. But once again, I must stress the level of investigative works at the front end of this work, as in the cycleways, as yet unseen. The amount of physical damage to our land, our rivers, our pipes is massive, and it will take years and years to reinstate to pre-earthquake levels. We must be patient. I find it pleasing to see the rates increases we've reduced to 7.93%. I note Auckland signed off at 9% yesterday, and they haven't even had an earthquake. I'd like people to give some thought to the value we all do receive for our rates. We have 3 big plastic bins that are removed from our properties, our waste, 2 per week. Turn the tap on, drink the water. Wash the dishes, the water leaves the sink. Push the button in the bathroom, gone. Libraries, a park down the road, sports field, the roads we drive on, the cycleways, funding for our wonderful community groups and their projects. The list goes on. Rates are charged per household, where there may be 2 or more people benefiting. So when we really think about it, our rates give us very, very good value. And we heard from submitters, those who came and spoke and those who submitted in writing. Over 80% wanted us to retain our assets, which is also my preference. I'm optimistic that it will still be possible to retain our asset base once our unknowns become clearer in the following months. Christchurch people have diverse opinions, and so it's natural and right that we as councillors also have diverse opinions in our representation role. We've worked well together to achieve a shared goal, and that is to make the best decisions for the people of Christchurch. And we will continue to do this as a team as more options emerge to fund our regeneration. Once again, I must reiterate that I will be working hard to retain our assets, and I'm pleased to hear other councillors have also expressed this desire as we move forward to future choices and as more of our unknowns become clear. We've all put in mega hours of work into this LTP over months and months and months. I thank staff, fellow councillors and the Mayor. It has been a movable feast, and I support the majority of the LTP content, but because I'm committed to retaining our assets, I'm compelled reluctantly to vote against the substantive plan. Thank you.
Vicky.
Thank you. This is the culmination of what I think has been probably about a year in the making. It just feels like longer. And I recall when we first came onto council this time, looking and seeing a number of things that were surprising and shocking. One was the insurance arrangements, which I found mildly incredible. The second was a cost share agreement that said, regardless of any insurance receipts, we will pay this much, which just surprises me that anybody would sign, and all of us are familiar with insurance and that you would never sign something like that. But actually the most surprising decision that I found coming back onto council was that post-earthquake, when the entire infrastructure had been destroyed or damaged in some way, especially the horizontal infrastructure, which is always the most expensive, that post-earthquake, the council had agreed to invest up to 350 million in creating a new company called Enable. And that was, to me, actually the most surprising, because post-earthquake, why a council that must have been able to see that it was faced with huge capital costs would do that when the government had already said we will provide ultra-fast broadband, so you're going to get all the benefits regardless. That was, to me, actually the most surprising of the decisions. I think that in looking, and that has been part of the problem, so in looking at how we get out of that, I note now that in this revised plan that the rural rates differential has gone, which is nice, thank you. The second part of it is that contained in here, the headroom has now moved from where we were unsure about it being 150 million, so the headroom has now gone in every year except 2020 to 300 million at least. And that's been done by the concept retained in here of in some way releasing capital of 750 million. Having reduced that capital further by at least 173 million, we can look now at a range of options that weren't there at the beginning of this process. And I like the words in the Mayor's recommendation, noting that the reprofiling of capital expenditure has already had an impact on our debt profile. We may not need to release tranches 2 and 3 of capital in years 2016-17 and 17-18, which also means that we can consider Enable once it becomes a mature business. The capital release program in those years will therefore be fully reviewed. So I think that we can actually, and I like the fact that Orion, the airport, and the seaport have been listed as strategic assets. I think we can actually get to where we need to be without in any way selling those major assets. And if we look at the dividends from those companies, we have in the past few years invested heavily in the rebuild of both the airport and the seaport, and there is an opportunity for those companies to return that favour, I would think. So I think that we can get to where we need to be actually without affecting those assets which we have now labelled as strategic in terms of their ownership. In terms of the red bus, actually I think it impedes what we can do in public transport. The red bus company sadly does not set the rules for what we want to do in public transport. ECAN does. And if by owning red bus we stuff up our chances to actually have control of public transport, urban public transport in what is just an urban area, rather than give that control to ECAN, which is a large rural area, or includes a large rural area, we actually impede our opportunity to do major things in public transport. What I like about this plan, sorry, I'm going to go 2 minutes, 1 minute over time, is that we have rebuilt the community in this plan. The city is always about people. And in this plan, we've got a Hornby pool, we've got a Hallswood Library, we've got the Linwood pool, we've got the Redcliffs Library, we've got the Brighton saltwater pools, we've got the library, the town hall, and we have shifted completely the transport mode so that walking, cycling and public transport are at the top of our preferred transport mode. We are, although it never affects rates, dealing with housing and homelessness. And we are even looking at possibilities around food forests and electrification of our own fleet. Those are things that, to me, make this city a place where, in my view, anything is possible. And that's where I want the city to be. That's the place I want the city to be, where anything is possible, where we actually feel that, and this is a community that feels that strongly. And that's what I think the plan does. To make a place where anything is possible, the budget is the foundation. And so what I think we've got here is a budget that's listened to what people have said and actually starts to create the foundation for making that happen.
Thank you. Jimmy.
Thank you. Yeah. As the Mayor mentioned, in the consultation document, the Council Long-Term Plan 2015 and the 21 is a key document to explain what services the project council will provide, why and how they will be funded, and also council must consult the public over their long-term plan and give people a meaningful opportunity to influence this plan through a formal consultation process. So the public feedback is the most crucial information to make this plan more practical and meet the people's needs. If we review the council the information regarding to the thematic analysis overall, that's in our current long-term plan, the meeting agenda, Appendix A, we can see the council received the 2,829 coded submission. It was about 83% opposed asset sales. So it's equal to 2,348 that's opposed to asset sales. And also they emphasize some reasons why not to sell the assets. The loss of revenue, privatization still producing rates rises, taking a short-term view, loss of control and accountability, loss of tangible benefit, etc. And also they give us some of the suggestions, can reduce rates increase and offset the asset sales. For instance, like prioritize infrastructure repair and spread the program out over a longer period rather than just in the first 3 years to do everything. And also focus on core spending, identify core level of service, scale back non-core level of service, and also try to continue renegotiate the cost share agreement with the government and negotiate with the insurer, etc. So based on this information, the residents and the community have been released a significant signal to us to keep the assets rather than to sell those assets. That's why I in favor returning the current strategic assets still to be remain on the list rather than to be removed. So yesterday we have vote regarding to those 5 assets like City Care, Raybus, Enable, Lancaster Park, Horncastle Arena, and the Council on Oak Street parking building, etc. If we took the assets off the list, we would be sure for cutting the democratic process and robbing the people of the chances to have their say and what should happen with them. I remember in the last term council, because I'm second term councillor, I would like to emphasize that these assets are high value and belong to the people, belong to the community of Christchurch. So I'm very proud. Last time I voted for to keep the assets. So yesterday I still to keep for the assets, no any change. So this is my consistent position. But regarding to some other issues, I would like to share the one positive, one negative. Positive is eventually, the Wananui Recreation Center, actually from the community board or from the local community, they emphasize, make submission for many years, but right now I'm delighted that this facility approved will be repaired and reopening. But the other 2 facilities, the Templeton flooding and the Broadshield renewal program, even yesterday or today, we have the proof to refer to the CEO to review and report back to the council at the end of August. But I'm still a bit disappointed because these 2 facilities happen for many years, and also there's a risk the issue. So we need to higher prioritize to fix these 2 facilities. So due to this reason, so it's difficult for me to overall to support this long-term plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Yanni?
Thank you. I want to start off with a quote that was made the day after the earthquake. It will be a difficult journey, but progress is certain. Things will get better and Christchurch will rise again. Let me be clear that no one will be left to walk this journey alone. New Zealand will walk this journey with you. We will be there every step of the way. Christchurch, this is not your test, this is New Zealand's test. And I want to give you another quote. It's a pretty big wish list, but it's up to the people of Christchurch to debate the plan, prioritise its projects, and decide how much they are prepared to pay to fund them. I think those 2 quotes really sum up the situation we're in today and part of the difficult choices that we have to make. You see, the people of this city, and I agree it's about the people, have never had a chance to have their say on the hugely expensive blueprint that was put onto us by central government. It hasn't, in my view, been a genuine partnership. In fact, the deficit that we're facing, 1.2 billion, is actually directly associated with that blueprint. Council was going to spend 800 million on the central city. The government's blueprint put 2 billion worth of cost on. There's no surprise about the convention centre. We always knew it was going to cost 400 million. That was always made clear to us. The reality is that the blueprint has been unaffordable. And that was John Key who made that first comment, and that was Jerry Brownlee who made that second. So I urge them to honour the things that they've said in terms of the support for this city. $11 billion worth of new tax revenue going into the government's coffers. And we're now having a debate about selling off our assets to pay for something we didn't ask for, that the public have had no right to have a say in. I don't support that way forward. What's really important to me is that we are seen to be voting in favour of our sovereignty, and we're voting in favour of a sustainable financial plan. We're voting in favour of the people who have made numerous submissions to retain our assets, and we're voting because we're proud to be called and labelled the People's Republic of Christchurch, because retaining our strategic and significant assets is about retaining our sovereignty. The reality is that selling off your assets that raise revenue and bring in income and have a whole wide range of commercial environmental and social objectives is putting the city at risk and is creating an unsustainable way forward, giving away, selling off $900 million of dividends over the 30-year plan to put into things like a sports stadium that will cost us money is, in my view, economically ridiculous. It just doesn't make sense. I don't believe that we need to rush. There are alternatives, and we've given you those alternatives through this process. Most of the anchor projects have been delayed. The financial headroom, as we've heard, has got a lot more room than it previously thought. So things have become a little bit clearer, and that is that most of the potential city expensive projects are going to be delayed, which means we don't need to sell off assets now. We can take time and take a considered approach. The other thing that I want to just raise is that there's a real question about how we pay for growth infrastructure, and I don't think the model's working at all. So while we're being told we need to rezone huge tracts of land in the suburbs, that has a huge environmental and financial cost, and it is an unsustainable way of supporting development. We need to get smarter about how we fund these different things. For example, why has no one considered a regional stadium tax? Why are we being lambasted in the media for not funding extensions to a northern motorway that benefits the north and our neighbours to the north, and yet we're being asked to also incur the cost of a regional stadium? So there are ways of dealing with these issues. We need to have more consideration. This is about our people, and these assets are core public services. So I can't support what the long-term plan is doing. I think, proceed with caution. There are huge risks to be learned from what's happened in other places around the world and in New Zealand. You just look at Wellington, 144 complaints for the private public transport operator that the council sold off a few years ago to a strategic partner, Infratel. Is that the sort of public transport system you want for our city? I don't think it is, and that's why I won't support getting rid of these important strategic assets. So again, I urge you to listen to what the people have said, respect the people that have made those submissions, and take into account people do not want us to sell off our assets. We've given them the right to be heard, which is more than what some of the other processes that have happened in our city. And what they have overwhelmingly said is don't rush into an irreversible agenda of selling off assets. So I'm voting in favour of retaining our assets. I think it's incredibly important to enable the things to happen in the future that have been talked about today for future generations. Don't give away that future possibility by selling them off.